Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 3rd of June, 2024, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to be joined by Professor Diane Rasmussen McAdie and also by Mark Anderson from the USA. Well, what is the theme of our news today? I think it's very much on the fact that it can't possibly be true that we have elected politicians who are discussing our best interests in Parliament, and we're now about to go through an election to select the latest best group of right honourable men and women in order to run our lives to the best of our satisfaction. I think something rather different is going on, and we're going to have a look in particular at propaganda and facts and misinformation in this news edition. So if you've joined us, welcome. Let's have a look, and let's start with a very simple tweet that was sent through to me, and I thought with my morning cup of tea, my goodness, this is really incredible. So here's the tweet. It's from @DefenceHQ, the UK's Ministry of Defence. It says, "Here's the reality. NATO never agreed it wouldn't expand and has been open to new members since it was founded in 1949. Its job is keeping its members safe." And I've commented on that by saying, as NATO weapons are unleashed on Russia at the hands of Western NATO allies, the UK Ministry of Defence pumps out the propaganda of "we've got clean hands." So let's have a look at this fascinating little video clip. Well, there we are, short and sharp with empowering, solemn music. And of course, the message is that we've done nothing wrong. It's all those nasty Russians. And the question is, has NATO pushed forward and effectively intimidated and forced the Russians into action? Well, that's what the Russians would say. But what was particularly interesting was just to have a little look at how the public responded to this video. So they were clearly challenging that little video clip, the myth. We had this one by Thinking Slow, and then we arrived to the 2008 Bucharest summit of NATO, which was a massive mistake on the Western side, trying to push Georgia and Ukraine into NATO. It was, quote, stupid at every level at that time. If you want to start a war with Russia, that's the best way of doing it. And that was an interview with Sir Roderick Line, British Ambassador to Russia, 2000 to 2004. And the person who posted this tweet, X, has even been kind enough to put the link through to the document itself. So I'm going to say this is really interesting because we've got the public actually engaging in order to challenge what the Ministry of Defence has said. Simplicicus here has actually put out part of a document. Now, I'm taking the document at face value at the moment, but in it, there's a quote supposedly from the Secretary of State, James Baker. "We understand the need for assurances to the countries in the East. If we maintain a presence in Germany that is part of NATO, there will be no extension of NATO's jurisdiction for forces of NATO 1 inch to the east." So these still need checking. However, the point I'm making is that it's very interesting to see the public coming back, and what they're effectively saying to the Ministry of Defence is, no, we are not accepting what you have said on face value. So if we put up two more, just to have a little look, let's bring this one in. So Lulu Bowen has said NATO is not sovereign. Is instructed and directed by European countries. So by proxy, NATO did agree to borders. France and Germany have absolutely overthrown the Minsk agreement. Now, there is more in this little tweet, but what I want to point out is the person is really thinking through what's going on. And of course, we start to see the blurring of the lines between what is NATO acting as NATO, what France and Germany are doing, acting as sovereign states. This must be immensely confusing to the Russians, but of course it gives the opportunity for the Western powers, the US and the UK in particular, to 1 minute hide behind their actions as a nation and the next minute hide behind their actions as NATO. Let's bring another one on screen here. And this is tougher. It says, no, the reality is NATO is not keeping anyone safe. It's backing wars in foreign countries like Ukraine. And that goes on to say, if there were no allied partners, no one had everyone else's back, then the world would be much safer and happier for it. So it says there may be occasional small wars in some backwater, but it wouldn't drag everyone into the fight. Diane, I'm going to welcome you to the news today. Your specialist professional area is informatics and research. What is your take on the response here? I think we've got the public really starting to do the job, which is argue back instead of just shout.
Thanks, Brian. Yes, glad to be here. Absolutely. I agree with you. It's really interesting, I think, how they are confusing and mixing the messages around to make people believe that perhaps correct information is misinformation and vice versa. And that's what I'm going to cover here today, to go a little bit further and to try to figure out what it is that they're actually doing and what we need to do to make people more aware of this. So I'd like to start here with a video from Sky News from that Debbie Evans sent to me over the weekend, and we'll go from there.
Lines in British life, things we don't agree on, political, cultural, ideological. But here, perhaps, is the deepest, when one part of the population rejects the other's version of reality.
I do not consent!
We've come here to West Cumbria, just outside the Lake District actually, and we're going to the Weekend Truth Festival, WTF for short. I think most people would describe it as a conspiracy theory festival.
So yes, WTF indeed. We have an article here as well that went along with the video that the journalist wrote, saying that Katie Hopkins was there. She was one of the headline speakers and said, "I smell a virgin," when she looked directly at the Sky News reporter who was there, as he sort of said, infiltrating it. And he interviewed some of these so-called conspiracy theorists and trolls and used the kind of language that Mariana Spring likes to use when she's describing people that don't see things in the mainstream view and the official view of things. And he quoted someone here saying, Teresa said, "It's not a fiction book, is it?" You know, as if to ridicule Teresa for thinking that it was in fact real. Well, it is real, and there's a sequel to The Great Reset. So these are not fictional items, and I think that's what they're trying to do, you know, just at first glance. And it talks about strong emotion. And if we look at the next slide here, if they were talking about the strong emotion of these conspiracy theorists and how angry they were, well, does anyone remember back in 2020 when those of us who didn't buy into the COVID narrative were called COVIDiots? This is an article from the Telegraph from early on in 2020. They certainly had strong emotion against the rest of us who had a different way of seeing things, didn't they? I know that UK Column has been looking at the so-called independent fact-checking organization Full Fact for some time. If you haven't read this article from Brian from back in 2012, I highly recommend it. It goes a little bit deeper into some controversy that the UK column was involved in and stood up against back in 2012. But I decided to go a little bit further into Full Fact itself and faux facts, or if you were really upset about it, you could maybe think of your own bad language to substitute with the word fact, but I won't do that because this is a professional organization. So here is a crowdfunder that we'll start with from Full Fact, where they were trying to crowdfund the 2024 election. And just to show you the video there that they were promoting to get people to donate to this £85,000 that we want. Go ahead, please.
Facts.
The facts.
The facts. These are the facts.
In the run-up to the general election, we're being bombarded with facts everywhere we look.
But how do we know what to trust? That's where Full Fact comes in. Full Fact is the UK's leading independent fact-checking charity.
Every day, the team at Full Fact tirelessly sifts through claims, statements, and news to ensure that everyone receives accurate and reliable information. And we must ensure that bad information doesn't gain traction and doesn't corrupt the results of the election. We've honed our skills over 4 general elections and 3 referendums, and now we're bringing all our experience to this election. But we're asking for your help.
We need to raise £85,000 to fact-check the general election at a scale never seen before. Your donation will help fund our biggest ever team of fact-checkers. That means more fact-checks on more politicians reaching more people. You'll be playing your part in amplifying good information to ensure that voters in every constituency can make informed choices on the issues that matter to them. Donate to Full Fact now and keep the facts at the heart of the general election. Thank you.
So, given that fabulous video with the amazing background music, I would like to go into Full Fact a little bit more as an organization, and in particular, who is at the top, who is in charge of Full Fact, and just to ask these questions of, do we really believe that this is, in fact, an independent fact-checking organization? My view is no, but let's see what you think. So I went into looking at some of the financials of Full Fact and some of the major supporters and some of these financial figures. You can freeze the screen. I know there's quite a bit there, but there's some information about who has donated to Full Fact in the past few years in terms of major grants, in terms of the directors who are on the trustee board and so on, and who the major supporters have been. You know what it says here, that basically this website Giving is Great, where I found these figures, say, well, it's basically it's in a fabulous position. They're doing so well. They're, really going forward. But who are the trustees that are listed there? So we see the full list of the Full Fact trustees. If we look at some of the biographies of some of the men individuals who are listed, we see here Michael Samuel. He is the co-founder and the chair of Full Fact. I'm going to go into him in a little bit more detail, so I'll come back to him. But let's look at these other two. Tim Gordon is on the World Economic Forum's Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and he is in charge of best practice AI. And he is working on the AI initiative for Full Fact, which is essentially AI trying to fact check facts. Finally, we have here James Harding. He is co-founder and editor of Tortoise. So maybe there's something there for Ben Rubin to follow up on as well. And so we can start to see here, okay, already we're seeing these are not independent people who are on the trustee board, and they're quite significant positions of power when it comes to the global structure of things. So going on to look at Michael Samuel, he has a total of 65 appointments listed on the Companies House website. And I know that Companies House is not always entirely reliable, but it's the best that we have. I think he has 15 current appointments if you filter it by that. And I'm really interested in what some of these companies do. He's listed as a philanthropist around the internet, and we kind of know what that sort of implies. He is in charge of a company called Murex. He's in charge of other things. We also have as well his wife, Julia, and they have this address called in Somerset, which I looked it up as a listed country house, very large mansion. That's their correspondence address that's listed in most places. We can see here Sir Marcus Samuel was his great-great-grandfather. He has the peerage title of Viscount Bierstead. I hope I'm saying that correctly. He was Michael's great-great-grandfather. And what is significant about him, and be ready for this, is that he is the founder of Shell Oil Energy Corporation. And we go straight through the peerage, straight through his ancestry, and we can track this directly back to him. And the peerage has maintained itself up to that point. It's really interesting to see as well, when you look at this website that is called The Mark, which lists his information about this, I guess it's like a reputation website. So you have to apply to be managed by The Mark. And you can then see their digital profile information. And so it's very carefully crafted, and it lists all these organizations that he's a member of. He's a chairman of this. He donates to that. It just kind of goes on and on and on. So I think it's interesting if you compare it to something like Companies House, you compare it to LinkedIn, that whoever these people are paying a lot of money to have their digital identity shaped into a certain way. So here's a couple of articles.
Diane.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Yes.
Diane, if I might just come back in here. I think it's important to say that we're looking at people and their connections. The main thing we're focusing on is that they're extremely powerful. And if you're
Yes.
involved with 65 companies, or at some stage you've been involved with 65 companies, it's interesting to see the amount of effort that must take to keep going. And also, what are their connections and interests? So if we're on the subject of independent fact checking, is it independent if people have got interest connected in? And the problem is we don't know. So I just want to stress and echo back to the audience that we're not saying these people are doing anything wrong. What we're saying is that if you're claiming utter transparency in your full fact checking, we need to be very clear who is involved and why they're involved and what vested interests individuals have.
Absolutely. These were a couple of articles that were linked from his carefully crafted profile. One is about the Princess of Wales, who visited, this was back in 2023 when she was still in public view, where she visited the Anne Freud Center, which is something that he is the chairman of, and that's worth quite a bit of money. That's actually him standing behind the Princess of Wales, and articles about mental health awareness, anxiety, climate anxiety in particular, that young people, or maybe people in general, are anxious about the climate. So again, another piece of agenda setting there, if you ask me. This is a website that is available through libraries. It's a subscription database that you have to pay for, or your libraries have to pay for. So this gives a lot of information on filings and so on by corporations. So just to give you a couple of ideas of the financials of these organizations, Murex Energy is one of many that Michael Samuel comes up on, and that has 2023 shareholders funds of, I can't see, that's a few £1 million. And if we go on to the next one, we also see the Anna Freud Center, and we see Full Fact. So the balance sheet of Anna Freud Center, the bottom line there is over £30 million, and Full Fact has a little over £1 million. So we see, once again, why are we doing this crowdfunding? Why are we trying to give the illusion that they need this £85,000 for crowdfunding this information? This is another organization that Michael Samuel chairs. It's called Civic, and again, we see this narrative over and over again that Debbie Evans has covered as well about change. We have to change. We have to change quickly. We have to do these causes that are systemic issues, and we have to go in and fix them. So I'm just going to ask this question because I hope to come back to this later. What is next for Faux Facts? And the next answer that I can find is AI. We are going to be using AI to do the fact checking, and it will be led by this man who is appointed by the WEF as being in charge of AI for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And Mariana Spring luckily wrote an article over the weekend about AI fake information. So I will be interested in looking at further what she has to say about this topic and how this will maybe tie in with the AI fact checking. And can AI fact check Mariana? That's a bigger question that I have, Brian.
Okay, Diane, thank you very much for that. Lots of questions to be asked around full fact, or faux fact, as we prefer to call them. But we'll be digging in and seeing what else comes to the surface. I did note the business about saying children are becoming increasingly anxious. You mentioned there in that presentation. And of course, we've heard so much of that as a result of the lockdown policy during the time of COVID. But we'll come back onto that perhaps a little later in extra time. Mark, let's bring you on, because if we're talking about who controls the power base, is it the politicians or is it organizations such as Bilderberg?
Well, Bilderberg has a way of sounding like old hat sometimes, Brian, but it keeps on ticking. They took off 2 years, allegedly, for COVID, 2020 and 2021. They may have had smaller breakout sessions or internet sessions at that time. But anyway, they're back with a vengeance. The 70th meeting in 70 years, as I've mentioned recently. And on this slide, it just gives the basics. They finally released their own press release, even though we had a good tip that they were meeting in Madrid, Spain, but they didn't release it until the first day of their meeting. They're just so open on the 30th of May. And it says here, the key topics for the discussion this year, and I gave the official website of the bilderbergmeetings.org that has been in existence for the better part of 20 years. Another time that they claim that they're so magnanimous and open and into transparency. But here are the 13 topics: the state of AI, AI safety, changing faces of biology, climate, future of warfare, geopolitical landscape, Europe's economic challenges, U.S. economic challenges, U.S. political landscape, i.e., they don't want Trump in there, among other things, Ukraine and the world, roll that off your tongue, Middle East, China, and Russia, some very common topics there. And that, in fact, is a theme to think about. Some of these topics are long-term. It's not just flash in the pan. This is something I won't read in its entirety. It's the typical brush-off statement that the Bilderberg anonymous media department, whose media department has no people that they name, and they don't even give a letterhead or a physical address. Again, more of their transparency. But they were founded in 1954, and they were seeded with CIA money. I've mentioned that before. A UK professor, Richard Aldrich of Warwick, has confirmed that CIA money started Bilderberg. Anyway, they mentioned, of course, that the meetings are held under the Chatham House rule, which states that participants are free to use the information received, but neither the identity nor the affiliation of the speaker or speakers nor any other participant may be revealed. In other words, who talks about what can't be talked about. And as these ideas and projects kind of work their way through society, no one will really know from whom or whence they came. So it kind of provides a cloaking for what they do. But anyway, moving on here in this next slide, I call it the Bilderberg Continuum. And what's important here, Brian, is that a lot of people get the idea that Bilderberg is flash in the pan, always on top of the latest topics. But in fact, they stay with key topics and have for several years. And this belies the argument that they just go there to have a retreat and take off their jackets, loosen their ties, have some caviar, and just vent their concerns, for the betterment of international relations. And they even make that claim by registering as a charity, the Bilderberg Association in the UK, that charity, and the American Friends of Bilderberg in the state of New York, another registered charity. At any rate, AI, as my self-made chart shows here, Brian, AI has been discussed 2013, it appears so. That's way back in the UK when they met at Watford, 2015, 2018, 2019, 2023, and this year. Russia, 8 times, 2015 in Austria, and all the way through to this year, 2024 in Madrid, Spain. China, at least six times, as far back as 2011 in Switzerland. And then these other years I show here, 2017, 19, 22, 23, and 24. Ukraine, 2014, when Bilderberg met in Denmark. And of course, that's the year that the Russian-leaning government of Ukraine was overthrown by Western insiders, including Victoria Nuland, who can be traced to Bilderberg directly and indirectly. Then also in 2022, 23, and this year, disinformation, evidently in Virginia in 2017, Italy 2018, Switzerland 2019, and Washington, D.C. a couple years ago. And pharma medical issues, Spain as far back as 2010 when I started covering Bilderberg for Jim Tucker, UK 2013, DC 2022, and Spain 2023. So you see they hang on to these issues a long time, which clearly suggests that they're nurturing and building on what they discussed the year before. So these are not just offhand, have a retreat, loosen your tie kind of discussions. Anyway, another one of the topics of the 13 this year is Middle East, as I indicate in this slide. And that can be traced most clearly, at least, to Sigrid Kaag or Kaag. I'm not sure how you'd pronounce her last name. Sigrid Kaag, I'll say. Cog in the wheel, right? A Dutch diplomat and politician serving as Minister of Finance and first Deputy Prime Minister in the fourth Mark Rutte cabinet. And that would be the Netherlands. And she's Senior Humanitarian and Reconstruction Coordinator for Gaza through the UN. So curiously, there's a Gaza concern among Bilderbergers this year in Madrid. And it's interesting to note that rarely, if ever, do you see an Israeli official at Bilderberg. And I can't quite fully explain why. So what position they're taking on Gaza, I don't know, Brian. It's curious that the WHO, for all its faults and schemes that we find very underhanded. The World Health Organization actually has done some admirable, laudable work trying to help the people of Gaza. So is Bilderberg feeling a humanitarian impulse toward Gaza? We'll find out soon enough. Anyway, in this next slide, another Bilderberg topic. I'm just kind of hitting on some highlights. There'll be more in-depth reports coming up about certain aspects of Bilderberg that I'll be writing and reporting about. But of course, the changing faces of biology concerns Mr. Albert Bourla, the chairman of the pharma colossus Pfizer. And Bourla has been to Bilderberg, I'm going to say 3 times now. It's at least twice, but I believe 3 times, Brian. And we'll move on from there, kind of given an overall framework here. Another person pertaining to the current Bilderberg topic, the changing faces of biology, is clearly Dr. Pamela Rendi-Wagner, nominated the new director of the European version of the Centers for Disease Control. And on February 2024, she was nominated to be the director of the European Centers for Disease Control for a 5-year period. So she was at Bilderberg too, along with Albert Bourla and others who have an interest in big pharma. And moving on here, Brian, this is an important aspect. I would contend, and I've covered Bilderberg and analyzed him quite a bit, I would contend that if it was only the private sector, Shell Oil, and Diane mentioned Shell with regards to Fox Facts, Royal Dutch Shell has been a strong underpinning of Bilderberg for many, many years. That's worth noting. But if it were Shell Oil, even Pfizer, various private concerns, if they were meeting to talk about their stocks, to talk about their financial fortunes, without government officials there and without the media there, you might argue, well, they can have their country club meetings and sip their caviar and do what it is they do. But the problem is breaking the public trust. And I mentioned in this slide, I don't necessarily need to go through all of it, but the government people there are about 35 of 131 attendees this year in Spain, Brian. That's about 26%. So a full 1/4 of those there are mainly current serving government officials, a few former ones. And I'll mention as a quick footnote, and this is curious, I looked twice, I'll look again, but I'm pretty sure there are no UK currently sitting government officials at Bilderberg this year. I don't believe there were any. There were former ones like John Sowers, who's with Newberg, and he used to be MI6. But there doesn't, and he's associated with the Bilderberg Association charity, but there appeared to have been no sitting British officials there this year, which is curious. But some of those who were there this year from government, Radoslaw Sikorski, Polish Foreign Affairs Minister, Tarun Chabra, the Senior Director for Technology and National Security of the U.S. National Security Council, Adelaide Adeyemo, Spain's Foreign Affairs Minister, the U.S. Deputy Treasury Secretary is Adelaide Adeyemo, and then Spain's Foreign Affairs Minister, Jose Albares. And then some of the media, we have Anne Applebaum of The Atlantic. Of course, we have Gideon Rahman of the Financial Times, the chief foreign affairs commentator, Matthias Döpfner, the chair and CEO of Axel Springer. He's notable because last year, working with Zanny Mittenbettles of The Economist, who of course was there this year as well, they announced through The Economist that Axel Springer was going to make a major foray into the U.S. media market. But the media, they sell out their ethics at the door of Bilderberg, just as government officials cannot claim that they can jettison or get rid of their government officials, a government title or government duties, that is. They can't just leave that at the door and go break bread with these privateers. That's an absolute breaking of the public trust, as it is with the media. And here in this next slide, I'll just mention in passing, I'm looking at something called Bilderberg Channels, and this is U.S. Army General retired David Petraeus, former CIA director and a frequent Bilderberg attendee. For the last 10 or 11 years, he's been assigned to a key Bilderberg post, that is KKR Global Institute. And the founder of KKR, Henry Kravis, is the husband of Bilderberg Steering Committee co-chair Marie Kravis, who also has the American Friends of Bilderberg charity. So we'll be looking at Mr. Petraeus, Brian, in some future reports very soon, both on the screen and in the written word by me. I'll be looking at this more closely, the real reason why KKR wants Petraeus on call. And I argue, and Forbes kind of suggests at least, that Petraeus's connections, and I would say including the one through Bilderberg especially, are what really give KKR an edge in hiring him, Petraeus, to head that KKR Global Institute. So Petraeus's Bilderberg connections make him very handy and useful for that private equity firm, KKR, which is among the world's most powerful equity firms. And then these last couple slides are articles I did on Bilderberg, Brian. This one last year in August, Bilderberg Beyond the Meetings, Part 1. I'm looking at doing Part 2 pretty soon, which will take into account not only this year's meeting, but looking beyond just the phenomenon of the annual meetings. And back about several years ago, I did one other one, and we can show that slide, and I can conclude. A Bilderberger in Action, Joseph Ackerman, a German-born banker, and he took over Cyprus some years ago. I wrote this article in 2015 when Cyprus had its financial woes, and he became the virtual economic viceroy of Cyprus. So it's interesting when Bilderbergers enter into action, and that's what we'll be looking at, Brian, in my future reports and that second installment I plan on writing, to look beyond just the annual meetings and really get into the nitty-gritty as to where these channels go. So over to you.
Mark, thank you very much. Well, we're looking at the power base, which, in my opinion, certainly ultimately controls politics, and we need to do much more of this. Who are these people? Who are the authorities they work with, or the organisations, and what's their true agenda? Well, if you like what UK Column does, then please support us for a mere £5 a month. That donation makes a huge difference to what we can do. And of course, it's our funding members that allow UK Column to work and be here. So if you're not already a monthly subscriber, please consider doing that and helping us expand. Now, the information we put out is always there to be shared. Give us a mention, please. We just say that we're still having problems with Facebook. We seem to have been blocked from our own account, but we are working on that at the moment. You can always help us out by making a purchase through the UK Column shop. We're in summer, but if the weather's similar to Plymouth at the moment, maybe you should look at a hoodie. We'll see what happens. Now, I'd just like to give a mention to our virtual event, Sunday the 16th of June at 10 a.m, when the UK Column team, that's just some of the team on screen, will be talking about UK Column, what we've done, how we arrived where we are, and we'll be encouraging our supporters to join in, get fully behind the UK Column, because our intention for the future is to expand, and you can help us do that. Now, where does that take us? This is another BBC article. Diane talked about us being bombarded with facts. People were claiming that. I think we're being bombarded with propaganda, and of course BBC is a lead. But this caught my attention. Writer's pride over queer Welsh adoption drama. And the caption under the photograph says that writer Daft James says his bilingual drama about a same-sex couple adopting feels like a massive triumph. Now, I can tell our audience that from the time that I took this clip, and it's live with us on UK Column now, that headline has changed. And the headline above the photo says, "Lost Boys and Fairies writer proud of adoption drama." So clearly there's been a problem in the BBC with the language that they've used, and that's had to be changed. But as I got into this article, I felt deeply uncomfortable, and maybe not entirely for the reasons some people may think. It was this image that caught my attention, because the caption that went with this is that the couple's social worker, Jackie, played by Elizabeth Berrington, assesses, supports and guides them, the two men, through the adoption process. And of course, in the image is a rather nice looking lady, very kind, who's helping these two gentlemen to adopt. But there's some questions. Let's think about them. Did the children's parents consent to their children being taken for adoption? under what circumstances were these children taken from their original birth parents? Did the children's parents consent to their children being placed with a male couple? And question 3, did the children have a say in how they would be brought up? And I'm going to suggest to the audience that nobody was consulted. I may be wrong on this, but I'm going to draw viewers' attention back to work that the UK column was doing way back in 2013. And on this occasion, we put out a video of a baby being snatched, a newborn baby being snatched from its mother's arms by very callous, cold-hearted social services people. The video will be in the show notes for today's news. This was a still that we put up on the 5th of April 2013. 2 ladies taking the baby, the mother screaming. It was truly harrowing to watch what was happening. We asked what kind of women can help snatch a newborn baby from his mother and remain so cold. We also asked who these women were. As I was looking at this information this morning, what happened was an email came in where another mother was asking the UK column for help because her children have been taken, snatched by social services. Now, I can't show you detail, but it says, "Good morning, I've seen a video of you on TikTok regarding the corruption of social services and my children were taken." So this is the harrowing reality of children and social services. Children taken with claims of risk of future emotional harm, never proven to any satisfactory standard, but in a court with no jury, no public, no press, and those children simply handed on to other individuals. I'm going to say immensely cruel, and the UK column is working hard in the background to see if we can get the lid off exactly what is happening around children being taken in UK and the numbers which run into the thousands. We'll end that segment there. Diane, let's bring you back in because you've been dealing with a traumatic subject of vaccine damage, and you've recently attended the rally up in Glasgow. Tell us what you found.
Yes, Brian, we just got back at about 2 a.m. last night from this vaccine injury event in Glasgow, traveling back to Edinburgh in the middle of the night. Not a fun place to be on the M8 at 1 a.m. when it's raining. But so first, I want to say that this was an event called the Bring the Noise podcast, vaccine injury, fundraising event, sponsored by Bring the Noise podcast. John Watt, who has been interviewed previously on the UK column. I believe we have a little video clip of the supporting act. So I didn't know who that was, but I posted this on Twitter last night. If you want my full coverage from last night, please go to my Twitter, which is DIANE UKC. That's Diane UKC. Please follow me there. I found out on Twitter this morning that somebody replied, and that is someone called Hand Pan Guy on TikTok. And Mike told me that he is commonly seen at other similar events, that the kind of music that he plays sort of meant to chill people out. And I was definitely feeling chilled out. And I was very interested in that instrument that he was playing, which apparently he makes himself. So it was really interesting to hear that. So, which was good for what was to come, because I would say the rest of the event was quite obviously emotional, very sad for those who are there who are seriously injured and seeking answers, and also just because of the controversial nature of the panel. So if we can go through this photo that I have from the panel, going from left to right in the picture, we have John Watt, Alex Mitchell, who was vaccine injured, Adam Rowland, who is very, very sweet. I met him last night, and Debbie has interviewed him on the column previously. We have Dr. Tina Piers, we have Dr. John Campbell, and Neil Hanby, who is an Alba MP up here in Scotland. I would like to note that this is a UK column exclusive. Somebody said, I think it was John Watt, who asks if there are any journalists in the audience. I know UK column is here tonight. You guys are sound. And so, of course, I raised my hand and cheered at that one. There weren't any other media organizations there that I could see. So I was really happy to be there to at least support the vaccine injured, regardless of what we might think of some of the panelists, one way or the other. And in particular, I would like to talk about Dr. Aseem Malhotra, who was there, but as you saw, he was not on the panel. He tweeted earlier in the day yesterday that he was in Geneva on Saturday for the Freedom protest event in front of the UN protesting the pandemic treaty stuff. But he took a flight from Dublin to Scotland yesterday, and he tweeted that as they were boarding the plane, a passenger took it into a cardiac arrest, and he had to help save the patient. So he was there on time for his part. It made it sound like he wasn't going to be there on time, but he was. Unfortunately, though, he left at sort of the interval and didn't come back. And so he wasn't there for the question and answer period. And I know that he sort of tried to address during his part of the formal part of the discussion that he was aware that people have questioned why he hasn't been helping more of the vaccine injured in the UK, because he should have the knowledge to do so. However, he said that he sees it as his role to serve around the world, and that's why he's been traveling to different countries. There are some people who think he was doing it just because he likes his speaking engagements and he has 600,000 followers on Twitter and on these things. So some questions there for me. So I stayed there until past midnight with my husband, John, who was there videoing most of it, holding his phone up with his one working hand. And we've got most of it on video. So maybe we can do a short clip once we have a chance to get that edited. The VIP event, which I was able to get to as being the only media person there. There were also some vaccine injured people who were there. We're talking about meeting the speakers. Of course, nobody got to meet Dr. Malhotra because he had taken off to his hotel, wherever he was. I did get to got to meet Adam, who spoke with him for a few minutes. Again, very, very sweet man. There's me with my husband, John, and with the other John Watt, and then another John Campbell, with my husband, John, as well. So lots of Johns there at the VIP event. I didn't get a chance to speak with John Campbell directly, but there was some, again, vaccine injured people there who were really trying hard to understand what was going on, getting answers. We had a podcaster, Craig Houston, who I did not expect to see there last night, but he was there to sort of give he was kind of the MC. He ran the auction. He spoke to everyone a little bit. And John and I are huge fans of Craig Houston. He's based in Glasgow. He has brilliant commentary about all of the SMP issues, we'll just say that. And he's really, really funny. So I got a chance to catch up with him. And I hope that maybe we can get him on the column at some point as a guest in the future, because he was just such a great man and so hilarious. So hopefully we can have some more discussion in extra. But just to say a few things, I guess, if I have a little bit of time, not a whole lot, but there were a couple of important points, people trying to get answers. One of the biggest reveals that I found was really, really interesting about some of the Q&A in particular was, for example, there was an A&E doctor who was there, who was obviously very switched on, very awake to what's been happening. And he said during the last few years, when people have been coming in with blood clots and brain bleeds and hemorrhaging, and that the other doctors who are there serving in A&E have said, well, this is the price that we have to pay to keep everyone safe. I thought that was absolutely disgusting. I heard from Dr. Tina Pierce, who got some pushback from the audience because she said that she had taken the jabs because she was forced to do so. So she got some pushback for that. She also said that she had a treatment for COVID in 2020. So there were questions from the audience around, was it COVID or was it something else? She went into a discussion about mast cell disorders, which I didn't quite follow, but that's what she was blaming for what she was calling long COVID. And Neil Hanvey, the MP, got a lot of questioning because he was trying to say, well, Labour is not going to get us out of this problem in the general election. And there were literally people in the audience yelling back at him, nobody is going to get us out of this. You're not getting us out of this. We need complete change everywhere. We need reform. Audience members asking about, why aren't you talking about Agenda 2030? Why aren't you talking about depopulation? Nobody wanted to go there. They were still a bit afraid to go into those sort of bigger questions that some of us have. as I was live tweeting, I was tweeting a question from the audience. And I know that this has not been verified, but it was a question that came up about graphene and things floating around in people's bodies as a result. I'm not saying one way or the other what on that issue for myself, but the question came up as I was tweeting that. My Twitter account got locked out and I lost everyone that I was following temporarily. And I had to answer a bunch of complicated questions to get back into my account. So it also makes me wonder if Elon Musk is as in favor of free speech as he says he is, because it was just very strange timing, Brian.
Okay, Diane, thank you very much for that report. Well, it's tragic that so many people are suffering from these injuries and there's still no proper reaction from the government. But then, of course, we know the government is in bed with the pharmaceutical companies that say their products are safe. And the UK column will be doing much more to expose what the dialogue has been between some of these companies and the so-called safety regulator, the MHRA. So stay posted with UK column for future news reports. Mark, let's bring you back in because supposedly, again, our government, our politicians, both sides of the Atlantic, would have us believe that the World Health Organization has our best interests at heart.
Indeed. Lots of ironies abound here, Brian. Noting here the World Health Assembly agreement reached on wide-ranging, decisive package of amendments to improve the international health regulations. Those regs actually go back to sanitation guidelines of the UN back in the 1950s. And then the IHR were officially created in 1969. They were amended in 2005. So they've been a long pre-existing thing. There's really not any surprise in my book that the IHR update, the amendments, the update of those amendments was completed. Of course, the other side of the package is, or the opposite side of the ledger is that the treaty was not. And as James Roguski indicated on UK column this past Friday, and I'm noting now, they could call a special session. It could easily go into late this year or even the next World Health Assembly, the 78th, in the spring of 2025, before they really get a crack at that treaty. So that does buy time for those opposed to that accord to marshal their forces, as it were, and reiterate their objections and their concerns about the treaty. It's no real surprise the regulations were updated given their history and how long they've been established. Of course, the things that Mr. Roguski mentioned about quarantine and the increased quarantine powers of countries for travelers is a huge concern in the articles of the IHR. Here on this slide, I need not go through all of them in the interest of time, but Tedros Ghebreyesus, the Director General of the WHO, had this to say: the decision to conclude the pandemic agreement within the next year demonstrates how strongly and urgently countries want that treaty, which I think is not necessarily the case. I don't think that they all, are chomping at the bit to get that treaty done necessarily. That's something to be yet determined, because, he added, the new pandemic is a matter of when, not if. Of course, the avian or bird flu is still the top candidate. Today's strengthening of the IHR provides powerful momentum, Tedros added, to complete the pandemic agreement, in his opinion, which, once finalized, can help to prevent a repeat of the devastation to health, societies, and economies caused by COVID-19. Of course, the most disturbing thing here, and this ties into what Diane is saying, is that the devastation caused at that time is also the devastation caused by the jabs. And the WHO, in never mentioning that in the IHR and treaty talks, that is always the biggest red flag. They, as an institution, they do not recognize any downside officially to the mRNA injections and things of that nature. And so that's why these issues continue to be such a concern. This happened around the time of Bilderberg, and in some ways, this is a more specific and urgent thing than Bilderberg. But Bilderberg also reflected, with Albert Bourla being there, their ties to Big Pharma and trying to nurture those issues along. Anyway, the new amendments to the IHR include introducing a new definition of a pandemic emergency to trigger more effective international collaboration in response to events that are at risk of becoming or have become a pandemic. The pandemic emergency definition, get this, represents a higher level of alarm that builds on the existing mechanisms of the IHR, including the determination of public health emergencies of international concern. According to the definition, a pandemic emergency is a communicable disease that has or is at a high risk of having wide geographical spread to and within multiple states, et cetera, et cetera. These slides, of course, will be something people can freeze and read in more detail. Other changes to the IHR include a commitment to solidarity and equity, or on strengthening access to medical products and financing, more money, more vaccines, et cetera, to avoid vaccine nationalism and spread these things around the world equitably, establishment of states, parties, committees to facilitate the effective implementation of the amended regulations, and creation of national IHR authorities to improve coordination of implementation of the regulations within and among countries. So those are some of the key highlights and changes. But here's an interesting twist, Brian. Epoch Times on the 17th of May of this year brought out that the ex-United States Centers for Disease Control director says it's high time to admit that significant side effects of COVID-19 vaccines exist. And they reported this to the Epoch Times credit. And there's a little bit more we can say about this. Moving on from there. Again, I won't share the whole thing, but here's some highlights. Dr. Robert Redfield, that's his name, former director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, said that many officials who tried to warn the public about potential problems with COVID-19 vaccines were pressured into silence, and that it's high time to admit that there were significant side effects that made people sick. Dr. Redfield made the remarks in a May 16 interview with Chris Cuomo on News Nation on television. And Redfield went on to say, those of us that tried to suggest there may be significant side effects from vaccines, we kind of got canceled because no one wanted to talk about the potential there was, the potential that there was a problem from the vaccines, because they were afraid that that would cause people not to want to get vaccinated. Dr. Redfield said, and we'll add a little bit more. In his interview on News Nation, Dr. Redfield said the vaccines that were developed as part of Operation Warp Speed were important and saved a lot of lives. However, despite their benefits, the drawbacks of the vaccines must be a matter of open discussion. So Dr. Redfield, Brian, was part of Operation Warp Speed at the time Donald Trump was president, pushing that operation. And that kind of gives you the timeline of when he got involved in all this. So at least we're seeing a longtime CDC official admit to a reasonable degree that there's real problems, something that the WHO can't seem to accomplish. So back to you, Brian.
Yeah, Mark, thank you very much for bringing us up to date there. And of course, what have we got? We've got another global organization, the World Health Organization, setting policy which politicians in our respective countries effectively just implement without any full and open dialogue with the public. So is the government running the country as far as health's concerned, or is it now the World Health Organization? It's very difficult to tell. But let's move on again. The subject is really propaganda in a way, but we're back with the BBC, and I think this is appropriate. Remember that if you are enjoying watching UK column news on a Monday, Wednesday, and a Friday, three times a week, BBC News, BBC Propaganda is on the hour, every hour of every day. So this is the power of it. This is the headline here: Tories pledge to tackle confusion over the legal definition of sex. So the BBC is trying to suggest to the public that this issue of what a man or a woman is now so difficult for ordinary people to understand that they can't really understand the policy that we're going through in the election. Of course, Rishi Sunak gets a quote. Let's see what they say he said on the matter. The safety of women and girls is too important to allow the current confusion around definitions of sex and gender to persist. Well, where has the confusion come from? Of course, it's come from government policy, both on the Labour and the Conservative side. He went on to say the Conservatives believe that making this change in law will enhance protections in a way that respects the privacy and dignity of everyone in society. So this is the twist. The Conservatives under Rishi are really saying we're here to protect you, and we are going to make the necessary rules to protect people. But if we look at how the policy has evolved over the years, the reality is it's been the development of the policy itself around men and women and what their sexual identifier is. It's been that policy which has confused more and more people. Now, I want to take our audience's mind back to Eric Pickles. This is the 11th of April 2013 that the UK column reported this quote. And what we said at the time was Eric Pickles, the local government secretary, leaves no doubt about what the real message is. He stated recently, April 2013, we are going to shake up the balance of power in this country. We are going to change the nature of the Constitution. Be in no doubt about our commitment to localism. I know I look like an unlikely revolutionary, but the revolution starts here. And I'm going to strongly suggest to our audience that this is exactly what's been unleashed on the public. Chaos, confusion, and breakdown is a key driver for the destabilization necessary for revolution. And it's the Conservative government at the moment that is doing what it said it was going to do in 2013, which is to bring in chaos in order to start that revolution and breakdown. And now apparently we have an electorate that doesn't understand the difference between a man and a woman. But if Eric Pickles wasn't enough, the same news report, we also commented on Nicholas Bowles MP, who was quoted in The Guardian at that time and elsewhere, that the then Prime Minister and his deputy Nick Clegg want their, quote, people power revolution to unleash chaotic effects across local communities. Chaotic, therefore, in our vocabulary, that's the Conservative and Lib Dem vocabulary, is a good thing. And this was backed up by Danny Kruger, former Cameron advisor and Tory candidate for Sedgefield, who said that the Conservatives plan to introduce a period of what he described as creative destruction in the public services. So against that background, I'm going to say for me, it is very clear that if you cannot understand the confusion and chaos and breakdown that's unfolding around us in all aspects of our society, but particularly in language and understanding, even the understanding of what a man and a woman is, this is an orchestrated attack from within our own government. Now let's move on, because the article in the BBC text quickly spoke about the Equality and Human Rights Commission. I paid attention and visited their website. Most people won't. They'll take it at face value. But of course, the first thing we see here is this organisation operates a business plan. So are we dealing with a quasi-government body with our best interests at heart, or are we dealing with a business plan? It's very difficult to know. Another one here is it's saying an update on our approach to regulating artificial intelligence. So now we see, as Diane mentioned earlier on, we're seeing links through to the power of the use of artificial intelligence to control the way the public behaves. We've got a little video clip here talking about the Equality and Human Rights Commission. Let's have a look at it.
It's about being open-minded.
Having respect for human dignity.
It's about recognising the good in people.
And being fair and decent to each other.
These are the values we all recognise, the principles of equality and human rights. But how can we all contribute to a fairer, more equal and prosperous society?
For future generations, we have got to start providing some guidance.
Because this will be a time that defines us.
everyone
gets a fair chance,
we all thrive.
So think about the message. We, ordinary people, men and women, we don't know enough about life to organise our relations with other human beings. We need the Equality and Human Rights Commission to do it for us. An immense cynicism, I think, in that little video clip. The lady, to me, was a blue-rinsed Tory, and so the words coming out of her mouth is designed for other voters to pick up on what she's saying, as if this was the way we should be going. So think through, what are we dealing with? A government-appointed body which is telling us how to interact with other human beings under a business plan. There are some weaknesses, I think. And if we have a look at what the business plan talks about, it's these topics. I won't give you them all, but I just want to highlight a couple. We've got tackling sexual harassment in the workplace, supporting change in uniformed services. This is really important because this is driving the woke agenda into the police and the military in particular. But there at number 3, we've got regulating artificial intelligence and tackling digital exclusion. So here are these people. They're working on everything, including upholding freedom of expression, supposedly, but they're also building their own organization and developing their people. So we had a little look into the team to see what we could see. This is Jessica Butcher, MBE, and she was appointed for 4 years. A serial technology entrepreneur, angel investor and business advisor, and co-founder, CMO of Blipper from 2011 to 2015 during its rapid ascent as one of the global tech pioneers. Now, she has been voted by the government to look after our relationships with other people. It seems to me that her main drive is in business, but she's got lots of personal opinions about the issue of personal relationships. And I believe this is one of the reasons why the government has selected her. And of course, she's received an award, including the BBC's top 100 women. So here we see the circle going around. But if you want to have a look at Blipper, here they are, transforming the world around us. But look at the subheadline, creating your own metaverse there. And if I bring this one up, you see the value of the business that we're dealing with. So according to this site from this lady, the projected value of the metaverse by 2030 is $5 trillion. But don't worry, their main interest is how you interact with fellow human beings. So this is a bit more from the site itself. I'll just bring up that artificial intelligence one here again. They're going to be regulating it. Well, are they going to be doing that, or are they going to be facilitating the use of artificial intelligence to the best outcome for those global corporations? It's very difficult to say. But I just want to bring on screen Mike Robinson's slide from way back the 27th of October 2023, because he'd picked up that Rishi was quoted as saying that the British people should have peace of mind that we're developing the most advanced projections for AI of any country in the world. And he went on to say the UK's answer is not to rush to regulate. This is a point of principle. We believe it's innovation. It's a hallmark of the British economy. So we will always have a presumption to encourage it, not to stifle it. And finally, instead, we're building world-leading capability to understand and evaluate the safety of AI models within government. So is the government body working for the best interests of the public, or is it really there working alongside the government in the best interests of the business? It's difficult to tell. But here's another twist. If we look at the Equality and Human Rights Commission and people involved, we've got Sue Thompson. She is also the CEO of Media Trust. Here she was CEO of the Women's Foundation Hong Kong. She's held senior positions at the Walt Disney Company and the Financial Times. She's been part of the Orwell Foundation, and she's one of the Charity Times top 15 women leaders. So immensely powerful woman who's worked with companies such as Walt Disney. But why are we interested in that? Well, let's have a look at this little video clip from the Media Trust itself.
Media Trust is a unique charity that changes lives through the power of media. For over 21 years, we've been asking media professionals to give something back, empowering charities, communities, and individuals to have a voice and be heard. And it's not just broadcast journalists helping out either. Last year alone, 600 media professionals volunteered their time, their passion, and their expertise to over 3,500 charitable causes.
What story would you tell?
Media Trust gives opportunities, encouragement, and most importantly of all, practical help, enabling those charities to establish themselves and raise their essential funds. Media Trust works to support marginalised communities, giving them both skills and confidence to challenge the way their community is perceived.
Isn't it time we changed the record?
Media Trust uses the power of the media to inspire, to support, to train and mentor young people. We make sure they're armed with the essential tools they need to find work and become self-sufficient. Media Trust's work transforms lives. Please help us to keep making a difference.
So there we are. Trust us to make a difference. They're transforming lives, but why do they want to transform lives? Well, have a look at the small print of the Media Trust, and I'll bring it up on screen for you here because it says that our Western Communicating Climate Programme, initiated and funded by the Garfield Weston Foundation, supported 30 environmental charities to extend the power, reach and impact of their communications. And what do they want to push across? It's climate change, and what's more is that they are working directly with the output of COP26, where many participants were able to translate their learning into action, hosting events and exhibitions at the summit, showcase stories of climate action and secure media coverage. So I'm going to end it there, but just to say that if we follow through what the government or the BBC say is happening with these organisations, it is very easy, if you're methodical, to work out there's something completely different happening. We're out of time now for the UK column news, so I must end there. But as always, do your own research, be methodical, and you will see that what we're being told on a daily basis is not exactly as the UK government would have it. We will end there. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are in the world. And if you are a monthly subscriber of UK Column, please wait for a few minutes and join us for UK Column Extra. We will see you then. UK Column News will be back at the same time on Wednesday. See you then. Bye-bye.